and we have honor in, of being able to sit here in a comfortable Beit Midrash without actually thinking practically about a particular situation, but to think theoretically, how does Halacha deal with this very tricky situation? So the first thing is, this is not practical Halacha, but it's interesting for us to have a view of, how the halachic process works. That's the first point. The second point is, so what's the value if it's not practical? I think that we will discuss in our discussion the value of life, the value of human life. In what situations do we respond in this way? In what situations do we respond differently? And I think this will help us understand a greater appreciation of human life. So even though it's true, it's not a practical halachic discussion, and Be'ezrat Hashem for all of us until 120, it should not be a practical discussion in any way, but it will be a useful understanding for ourselves, who are Baruch Hashem, we are all blessed with healthy lives. It will be an opportunity for us to see how halacha views life. Okay, those are the 2 words of introduction. Now our plan is like this. What we're going to do is, I'm going to share a case. The case happened a few years ago in England. The cases are the same through generations. The fact that it wasn't last week, but it was a few years ago, doesn't really change the situation. We're going to look at the case. We'll share thoughts on that. After that, I want to talk about murder. When is it considered murder? When is it not considered murder? And then we're going to look at different times when in halacha, halachis have assisted people to end their lives, and try to understand what's the common denominator in order to.
For animals as well?
No, this is only human lives.
So if there's a dog that's in pain and everything, a lot of times what the people do is put it to sleep and let it not be painful but to its death. But there's some medicine that you can help to actually treat it and keep the dog living.
So we're only talking about a human life here. There's a difference between, a human life is blessed with a human soul. We have duties in this world, mitzvot lekayem. We're here for a purpose. We're here to do particular things. That's why Hashem has given us this life, and therefore we're only talking about human life, but not any other type of life. Okay, here's some sheets. I'm gonna send them down. Did they reach their destination?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna just skim very quickly through this story that's on the front page, and then afterwards, perhaps you'll share if you're on the side of this woman who's decided to end her life, or the people that were against it. So the story here, as you can see, there's a woman, and her name is Anne Turner from Bath. Bath is not a room in the house; it is a city in London. City in England. I think there are lots of Roman baths in Bath, which is why Bath is called Bath. Anyway, that's where she's from, and she has a progressive, incurable, degenerative disease. And she went to a clinic in Zurich where doctors gave her drugs with which to end her life. Now, this is her life at the moment. She could only walk with a stick, and she had the possibility of a future in a wheelchair. Now, some people would say she wasn't really an invalid because she could walk around, but she said her situation was only going to get worse. She, do you see this over here? She had slurred speech. She had difficulty swallowing. She couldn't drive. She couldn't take a bath without help, and she had difficulty feeding her cats. Now, she had already tried suicide. It didn't work, and therefore she decided to go to this clinic. Now, I don't know in what situation you might want to do this, but the BBC produced a documentary because the night before she spent her last evening with her family in Zurich, and then she had this very planned and quite peaceful death. The Bishop of Oxford was very much against it. Can you see? We would not accede to the request of a teenager if they asked for help in killing themselves. I know that if a person is old and deliberated and worried about the degenerative nature of their disease, that is very difficult, but I want to try to convince them that even if they got into a state where they were very dependent and also very helpless and useless, their life was still precious. So those are really the two sides of the argument. You have the Bishop of Oxford was really very much against it, and then this woman and her family saying that she was living a very poor life and it was only going to get worse. Okay, that's the story. Anyone have any comments on it? Does anyone see her side or the other side? In favor or not in favor? She did the right thing or did the wrong thing? Matem Choshvim?
It's hard to say something because in general,
Thomas, how are you? Yes.
in general, I think that it's up to the people that are living that situation.
We can't really judge on her behalf. And if somebody would ask, you'd be happy to help. I mean, if somebody decided that's what they wanted to do.
If I would be the doctor,
Yeah, exactly.
No,
You wouldn't do it.
I don't know.
I see. Okay.
I don't know.
Oh, it's tricky. Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Anyone else have any comments? Dar.
Also, comment.
Gifties. Told you, Gilad. See, nice chap. Yeah.
Also, like comments, like I'm not going to judge her because who knows what she was doing. If it was me or my family member, I wouldn't do it. I would agree with the bishop in this case. But yeah, I'm not going to judge her. But if it was me or a family member, I wouldn't. Or if I was a doctor, I wouldn't.
So what's preventing? What sort of value is telling you that's not a good idea?
I think one, being a Jew, like you have to, like, at least I personally have Cohn, that everything that happens is for a good reason. So at first I would believe that Hashem would help me, and that I would die how Hashem wanted me to die. Two, if I was a doctor, I would think that was murder in some sense.
Sure.
Because you're killing someone, even if they want it to happen. I think it's who knows where. And the Torah is against suicide too.
Sure.
It's a suicide. So from a Jewish perspective,
it would be very hard to justify
right.
it.
It's tricky.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Yes, it is definitely tricky. Were you going to add something, Gilad?
No.
Okay. Does anyone have any situation?
Yes, I have.
Yo, Ezra.
So I would think that the bishop is going a little bit too far, in my opinion. Clearly, she has a means for it. Clearly, she's in control of her own life, and clearly she has she's doing what she wants to do. Whatever that she does is not my responsibility, not my personal business to get into, not my business to even send her to a psycho clinic or anything at all. Whatever the heck anybody says, but that's her life. That's how she wants to do it. And to be honest with you, I think that she probably has a reason of why she should be able to do it.
Yeah, she's an intelligent person. She's a thoughtful person.
Why did you have to travel to Switzerland though?
Because it's illegal in England. This is the story. She was from England, but it's illegal in England.
What's it in England?
This assisted suicide is illegal in England.
Recently, they also changed the law in Switzerland, and you can do it even if you're not sick.
I'm sorry, what?
You can suicide. You can apply for the.
Oh, really?
Suicide, even if you are not sick.
Wow.
And how does that work?
You go there. You have to make some hours to speak with a psychologist, and then if you still want to do, they give you the green light.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, back to the
interesting. Can anyone think of a situation where where that it could work? Do you understand my question? Meaning that you would be willing to
DNR?
No, this isn't DNR because here, huh?
Do you mean a DNR in that sense?
No, because that's do I mean that? I see what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I'm not. Yeah, you're right. It's bikes that DNR is do not resuscitate.
Do not resuscitate. So you can say like if somebody has a heart attack, God forbid, right there and then it might say in their file, "Don't revive me, just let me die." That's what they want. So,
Right. Interesting.
Maybe they're
Yeah,
already
right.
for whatever reason they have. They said that there's it's like an order that they made in Canada quite a few years ago about they make that wish at, I don't know, 80 or something. They already have a heart condition, then let's make it so that if they were to have a heart attack, they don't want to. If that's when they die,
That's interesting because that's.
then and not just.
I wonder if that's less assisted. It's sort of like somebody. I could say someone, and I choose not to, which is different to here. We're talking about doing something as opposed to not doing something.
Yeah, it's just an order that I think they still haven't maybe have.
From my point of the story, it doesn't look like the bishop will be doing anything to assist the suicide in the first place. So what's his business to get involved in it with?
Yes, it was, but because it was a very public. It was very public. Her choice to do this was very public, and I think that's why he got involved. I think you can probably find out. I don't know exactly. But nowadays, you don't need to know. You just need a smartphone, and then you can know everything.
Well,
yes.
She was in like a ton of pain. Like every second
Sure.
was excruciating. Like
yes.
She's just in a.
Give her a joint.
Like a joint won't fit. Like it's
not a bad, but like
whatever. It's a decision. It's a position. It's like some situation. There's no.
Is there a way to get out of it? Or is there no?
No. Like there's no. Or maybe just have her on like codeine for the rest of her life. Like I don't know.
Yeah. Josh. You also there has to be, as long as it can be cruel. No.
Yeah,
like there has to be a situation.
What if she's in so much pain that like either the option is just keep her like super drugged for her whole life, and then she's not really living, she's not really present.
Right.
Or she's in insufferable pain and there's no cure for it.
Well,
wow, that's interesting.
In pain or not?
She is in this situation. No, in this situation it's not.
Because like, I know a person, and
there we go.
Not my mother's friend's mother. She's like, she once asked me like, do you, in this kind of case, so she's completely paralyzed, no wheelchair, everything else. She's always all these medical problems, but she doesn't have any. She still has full capacity of self-awareness and brain functionality, whatever. So she's always watching some movie or in some shiur online. Like she
wow, that's so holy.
Well, she's in a wheelchair, but she's like, you'd actually be amazed at some of the things they have online. Like
that is amazing.
Like tours in the museum of anthropology, I think that it's called, and natural history. And she's going to these things all the time, but it's on her iPad.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have any problems mentally. She is like, she's a very not so very friendly, debilitating, not a very good situation, let's put it that way.
Sure.
It's kind of like this, but she's in that wheelchair now.
I see what you mean.
So her point.
She's like one stage beyond the story that we're looking at.
She's kind of like, but she's still like thinking, but she's not. She's just 98% crippled, basically.
Wow.
So, or 90% maybe, but she's doing things from the comfort of her wheelchair on an iPad. So
let me. Okay, I'm gonna pick up from where you are now. I'm just thinking of the Makorot, meaning the halachic positions. Again, I'm not sure this is not the complete halachic story, but this is the halachic story that I came across, researched. I want to talk about 3 parts really. The first section, that will be sources 1 to 4, are about the value of human life. And I suppose we're going to leave your question, Josh, for the second part. Your question, sort of quality of life and how much, am I living, and is there a level of pain that if I cross that pain barrier, that after I cross that barrier, there will be more flexibility? I think that question is such a heavy question. But before we get to that question, I want to speak about just in general. This is relevant. I'm going to start with the Gemara tells us over here. Well, there are 2 things, actually. First thing is the pasuk, that murder is wrong. I mean, it appeared in Pashat Bereshit that we read a few weeks ago. It appears a few times in Torah, obviously in the 10 Commandments.
How do we know that killing oneself is murder?
Oh, that's a question about suicide. How do we know that suicide is murder? That's your question. Mm-hmm. So we know from the Gemara tells us. That's yeah. but that would be a separate discussion, but not a discussion for today. But really, when we told that that killing a person is forbidden, and we know we're not allowed to injure a person, and the Torah makes an effort to distinguish, but that there's no difference between harming somebody else or harming meaning whether the person I'm harming is someone else other than myself, or if I'm harming myself. The Gemara makes an effort to explain that there's no difference. Any sort of harming, whether to you or to me, is forbidden, and from that we see also that just like the Torah doesn't distinguish between harming myself or others, so too, chas v'shalom, somebody brings someone else's life to an end or their own life, they are chayav mita. I mean, they've sinned quite significantly. Okay, so the first source over here, which should not come as a surprise to you, v'ish ki yakeh kol nefesh adam yumat, a person who kills the soul of another will be put to death. So, if I end somebody else's life, the punishment is murder. I want to go straight to source number 2 because there shouldn't be, I hope, too much to discuss on source number 1. That should be quite sort of universally accepted. Now look at this. Source number 2 is very interesting. He who closes the eyes, you see, hama'atzmo im yitziat nefesh. If somebody is really, leaving this world, somebody, Shalom Aleichem, how you doing? It's such an honor to see you. If somebody is leaving this world and I close the eyes of a person whose soul is departing, Harizeh shofech tamim, that is considered as if I'm a murderer. Now that's very interesting because I may be, what's the word? I may be bringing forward the final moment by minutes, maybe even seconds. He's literally about to go, and I'm really just preceding that by a couple, causing it to happen a minute earlier, 30 seconds earlier. The person who does that is a murderer, comparable to somebody who, in cold blood takes a gun and shoots a entirely healthy person. So it is quickening the death, even if it's only by a second. Why? Mashlul l'ner shekava v'holechet. It's like a flickering flame. Adam meniach etzba'o aleha miyad nichpa. It is immediately extinguished. And I think this mashal is brilliant. I'm sure you all get it. Because really, if I have a flickering flame, right? If I have a flickering flame and I put my piece of paper next to the flickering flame, I can cause a fire. You follow? And there's no difference between, any fire can cause a huge, it can get very big very, very quickly. Therefore, as long as the flame is still lit, it can do exactly the same as any other, as long as there's still a flame there. As still as there's a little bit of a spark. That spark, however weak it is, has the same potential as a huge bonfire, because the spark can become just like that. You follow? And therefore, if nishmat ha'adam, if a person's soul, the sort of relationship between a body and a soul is like a candle and a flame, so then that flickering end of life, well, that moment, it's an infinite moment. You follow? If you go down, not to the next source, the one beneath it, I think Rabbi Jacobovitz writes it beautifully. He writes, the value so that any part of life, any part of life, do you see that? Even only an hour or a second is of precisely the same worth as 70 years of life. Just as any fraction of infinity, being indivisible, remains infinite. You follow? Shalom Aleichem, how are you doing? What a joy to see you. It's all right. Here, this is a sheet. We're just reading Rabbi Jacobovitz. He's brilliant. Do you hear what Rabbi Jacobovitz said? Because human life is infinite. So a minute of infinity is still infinity. So therefore the flickering flame. So what's important is the reason why euthanasia is such an important question then is because it's no less bad than murder. You follow that, which is an important idea to have in mind. In Halacha, there'd be no distinction between...
The bishop isn't doing any euthanasia, he's just standing by. It's not
the
murder
poor
then
bishop.
in that case.
I think we might there's one in the middle, no? It might be a different sheet. If we've run out of sheets, that'll be a Shechiana moment. But it's a joy to see you.
Sorry, I lost track of time.
No, it's such an honour to see you.
I love this year.
Did you notice the light that just came in the room, Josh?
I know. I
Did
came
you?
into the room full of light.
Oh, that could also be. The infinity. Very good. So we're talking about very nice. That was very smooth. Good. We just made a very good point. In Halacha, I think this is critical. In Halacha, there's no distinction. Any ending of a life is murder. And that's why we have to take it so seriously. And I imagine that's why Dr. Thomas wondering about whether he would, administer this medication or not, because that's exactly the problem. Because there's no difference between the doctor operating under medical conditions in a hospital, in Halacha, and a guy with a gun. They're both ending the same, they're both extinguishing the same flame. You follow? Okay. So that's all one side. And we take that side seriously, it would really rule out the possibility of assisted suicide. Nachon? Because we're really equating it with murder. Nachon?
Yeah, so assisted suicide is never okay.
Well, based on what we've seen so far, but we're going to see some more things.
There's more, okay.
There's always more. Okay, look over here. If we look at the Rambam in Hilchot Avelut, which is based on the Gemara in Shabbat. So source number 3 is based on source number 2. So he says like this: one who is in a dying condition is regarded as a living person in all respects. Do you follow that? It is not permitted to bind his jaws, stop up the organs, or to place metallic or cooling vessels upon his navel in order to prevent swelling. He is not to be rubbed or washed, nor is sand or salt to be put upon him until he expires. He who touches him is guilty of shedding blood. Meaning, do you follow that? Shofech damim is a phrase that Torah uses to describe, that Halacha uses to describe murder. Ela yishe mahat. You have to wait a little bit. Shema yit alef. V'chein ein korin alav. You wouldn't do any of the mourning signs in front of him. He says over here, to what may he be compared? To a flickering flame, which is extinguished as soon as one touches it. Whoever closes the eyes of the dying while the soul is about to depart is shedding blood. Shofech damim. Same idea. You follow? This is really based very much on the Gemara that we saw earlier. Now, based on all of this, it would be very difficult to find any justification. However, we're going to look at the other side of the argument, because as Josh was saying before, there's just exactly. But there's a moral instinct that sort of says that it can't be categorical. There has to be a situation where, or maybe there isn't. Is there a life that that is so painful that it's very hard to say that. But we're going to go now to the other side of the argument. If you go now in source number 5, I stuck it in for poetic reasons. We read, if you remember, on Sukkot, in the book of Kohelet, Megillat Kohelet, Lachol Zman Va'id, there's a time for everything. Eid Laledet, there's a time for birth. Va'id Lamut, there's a time for death. So this Eid Lamut is a very, very important idea. Eid Lamut means that there is a time. You follow? Now the question is, can we be involved in that time? And based on everything we've seen so far, it would seem to say that we aren't. However, there is one very small way that we can be. That there is like an opening to the possibility, And that's in source number 6. Source number 6 is the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch, just before the laws of mourning, Siman Shin Lamed Tet. Now this is the words of the Ramah. You know how in the Shulchan Aruch we have the words of the Mechaber, that's Rav Yosef Karo, and then afterwards you have the words of the Ramah. Are you familiar with this? There's Ashkenazi, and there were two people writing around the same time.
Rabbi Ashkenaz.
Yes, so this is the Ramah.
That's the Ramah.
Yeah, the Ramah is, he lived in Prague. Wrote a very, very important book called the Mapa. The Mapa, that like the Mapa, the Shulchan Aruch. There were two people. There was Rav Yosef Karo, who was writing a book of Halacha, and he was originally from Spain, and he lived here in Israel. And then there was this rabbi in Prague, following the customs of Ashkenaz, writing in also a book of Halacha.
Did he comment on the Shulchan?
Yeah, then what happened was he got a copy of the Shulchan Aruch, and he realized, this is a very similar project. In a moment of great humility of the Ramah, of Moshe Isserles, he understood that there's no value in publishing a second book. So all he did was he took Aruch, and wherever he felt there was something to add, something in the Ashkenazi written about in the words of the Shulchan Aruch, so then he would add footnotes. Haggah is a footnote. And perhaps one of the reasons why the Shulchan Aruch became the code of Jewish law nowadays, we followed the Shulchan Aruch, but there have been many works of Halacha written throughout the generations. But because the Shulchan Aruch brings the book of the Ramah together with the book of Rav Yosef Karo and creates one text, so then this is something that the whole Jewish community can study. That's really what made it into a unique book and probably gave it the place that it has. So we're going to look now at the words of the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserles, writing a footnote on to the Shulchan Aruch. Now listen to this. I'm not sure if I translated the whole of it, so I'm going to write. He really talks about euthanasia 400 years ago. Now, Cohn, is that right? I think it was about 400 years ago. V'chein, he writes, Lamet shiamut mehira. You are not allowed to hasten the death of someone who is leaving this world. Now, we saw that already. To hasten the death of somebody who's leaving this world is murder. Isn't that amazing? Meaning it is no different halachically, because meaning there's a malach hamavet who decides when someone's going to leave this world. If I take that decision upon myself, so then that's what a murderer. Yeah, I become a murderer. So it doesn't make a difference if the guy was going to live for another 20 years, another 50 years, or another 15 seconds. But the fact that I took the role of the malach hamavet on this particular person, that makes me into a murderer. You follow?
But how don't we define murder as killing without reason? You have a reason to kill this person. So why is that?
No, I'm not sure. I don't think you can. It's still wrong. Meaning, you can never. The only time that you're allowed to kill somebody else, meaning there could be lots of reasons why you murdered. Yeah, is to save my life. Haba lahorgacha, hashkem lahorgacha. Somebody,
so even he's in great pain, like unbelievable pain. Doesn't.
You've got. See, look, someone else with. Yes, exactly what Josh was saying. So we're going to continue. Let's continue reading because he does have a little point to make. Yes,
what about
Thomas.
I'm the doctor.
Yes.
I set all the things for getting to suicide, and the person who wants to get to suicide, he has only to push a button.
He has what? Sorry.
He has only to push a button for make all the things start.
He has what?
So basically, there is a machine. I prepare all the stuff with the drugs, all the stuff, and then the person who want to die has only to push one button. But the final action
is his.
Is his.
That is such a good question.
He's not allowed to do that either.
Yeah, I'm assisting him. Yeah. It's not murder.
He's not allowed to push the button.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah, he's not allowed to.
Yeah. So the final action is made by the person.
So I don't think that's obviously I'm less That's not murder. That's facilitating a murder. So it is. But I think it would not be. It would be a halachically problematic thing to do, but it wouldn't be murder, because I facilitated rather than actually
Isn't it like-
committed.
It's like asking a Jew to turn off the light for you on Shabbos.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I didn't press the button. You pressed the button, so but I caused you to press the button.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, there's something like that. Yeah,
What about if somebody
lifna iver.
who wants to die asks you to be driven to the place where there is the clinic? You have to help me.
Oh no, it's the same. I mean,
Yeah, but it's
yeah,
another
the same
level.
sort of.
Unbearable.
That's a very, very good question. I think it would be. I don't think it's murder, but I think it's halachically problematic. That's what I think. We're going to read now. There is one small situation, and I want to explain what it is. Here we said that you're not allowed to cause death. Kagon mi shehu goses. Do you see? We're in source number 6. It's small. Zman arach lo yechol lipared. Asur lishamet habar v'hakeset mitachtav. מכוח שאומרים שיש נוצות מקצת עופות שגורמים זה, וכן לא יזיזנו ממקומו, וכן אסור לשום מפתחות תחת ראשו כדי שיפרד. There are all these sorts of like ideas that can help somebody die quickly. You follow? So I'm not allowed to do anything that will hasten a death. Like somebody will say, if you move him, we saw in the Gemara says, if you put your hands over their eyes, you can cause them to die. We're talking about the last seconds of somebody's life. So there's stuff that you could do that would hasten it. And the Shulchan Aruch, based on, I suppose, what they believed at the time.
So let's bring in the case from Shalom Melech.
Oh my gosh. You're talking about jumping onto the sword.
Mm-hmm.
That's an excellent question. But that's a question about suicide. And I suppose...
Is that considered euthanasia?
Yeah, that's a very, very complicated story. I'm going to leave that for now with your permission, because it's slightly off our top. That's suicide in neto. I mean, that's really a suicide question. And let me finish what we're talking about now on assisted suicide. I'm helping somebody else end their life. What he did was wrong. If I were to facilitate the soldier.
The soldier?
Yeah. There's a story you should read. I mean, do you know the story of in the book of Shmuel about the battle?
It's basically the beginning of Shmuel bet.
Okay, so
a convert from Amalek, they said, came to David, and he came with the crown.
A what? A convert from?
Yeah.
From who?
And I'm not sure. No, not the head, but came with the crown to David and said, "Here, here's the story of what happened. Basically, Shaul was about to die, and he chopped his head off, and David killed him, or had him executed."
The person who killed King Shaul. Shaul was injured in battle.
Yeah, but
and
he told him to kill him.
Yeah, exactly. And Shaul told this person to kill him. But when David heard that this person had fulfilled Shaul's wish, King David executed the executioner.
How is it considered a wish? He probably was under orders to do that.
Yeah, but it's a important story, but it's slightly it's a suicide question.
Technically, he doesn't have to listen to him, because if the king orders you something that goes against the 10 commandments, you don't have to
absolutely, quite right. Okay, I want to go now. There's a very subtle difference in the Ramah between what we just said in that fragile moment just before somebody is about to end this world. Somebody's about to leave this world. That fragile moment, they're about to leave. At that fragile moment, you're not allowed to do anything to speed it up. You have to just allow the person to depart in their own way. However, listen to this. Aval, im yesham davar shegorem ikuv yitziat hanefesh, כגון שיש סמוך לאותו בית כל דופק, כגון חוטב עצים, או שיש מלך על לשונו, ואלו מעכבים יציאת הנשמה, להסירו משם. דאין זה מעשה כלל, אלא מסיר המונע. That's a very, very important point. Sometimes there is something that's not hastening the death, but rather the person is ready to leave this world, but there is something preventing them from leaving this world. Now the Gemara, the Ramah gives a few examples. One of them is if there's a wood chopper outside chopping wood, and the noise of the wood chopper is distressing this person, and they want to leave this world in peace. So you're allowed to ask the wood chopper to stop chopping the wood, because when the wood chopper stops chopping the wood, they'll be quiet. And that serenity will allow this person to leave this world. Now, let's say the guy decides to chop wood for the next 6 hours. I mean, I don't know if this could work medically, but imagine, hypothetically. So maybe this, the individual lying down, their life could extend by 6 hours. And if I ask them to stop chopping now, so then they'll leave the world this minute. But I would be allowed to ask them to stop chopping the wood, because that is not hastening the death, but what it is it's delaying, it's removing a ikuv. There's something preventing the person from leaving the world in peace, and by removing that which is preventing them from leaving this world in peace is not considered as euthanasia.
But it's a sore, or you
are allowed to do that. Likewise, the Gemara gives 3 examples. The one was the guy chopping the wood. The second one is if they've got salt on their mouth, salt on their teeth, salt on their tongue, and the salt is like disturbing them, upsetting them, then you'd be allowed to remove the salt to calm them down, to allow them to leave this world. Because removing the salt, so I'm doing an action. It's not about being active or passive, but the question is, am I hastening a death, or am I removing the barrier that's preventing them from leaving this world in peace? You follow? Yeah. So I'm not allowed to hasten the death, but I am allowed to remove the barrier that is preventing them from leaving this world in peace. You follow? Those are the words that the Ramah. I just want to give you one modern example that I heard of it's actually a relative of mine many, many years ago, maybe 20, 30 years ago. It was the end of this person's life. His name was David. It was the end of David's life. And all of his children and grandchildren and cousins and siblings were all sitting around him. It was on a Friday night, and they were having a Shabbat meal. And everybody was there, and they decided they didn't want to leave him because it was really a very tricky time. So they had, so the family sat there, and then after the family left, there was one representative who took, every 2 hours. They had to be there, and they had, sort of like from 10 till 12, 12 till 2, 2 till 4, through the night. Huh?
Who?
Huh?
Who was this?
There's a chap called David, many years ago, an old man who left this. Yeah, who left this world. I'm a Cohn. I wasn't involved in this, but it is something that I am.
You're not allowed to be next to an almost dying person?
Yes, yeah, of course. Yeah. Anyway, so then it got to maybe 4:30 in the morning, and the person on duty, you can't do very much about it, but they really had to go to the bathroom. And they left, and they went to the bathroom, and that was the moment that he left this world. But it could well be that he didn't want his family to, he wanted this serenity, like, sort of, maybe he was waiting in a way. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in that sort of situation, I'm allowed to remove barriers. So in Halacha, I suppose in response to what Josh was saying earlier, the only halachic opening is that if I am hastening a death, even by a minute, then that's not something I'd be allowed to do. Okay. But if there's a barrier, I'm allowed to remove the barrier in order to allow them to leave this world. Yes?
So let's say you have a disease and you need medication for it, but the medication is causing another thing, so you have a two-sided death. would you be allowed to take off the medicine so he can go in
Yeah.
peace because he's in great pain and everything? Because that's, I think, that happened to my grandfather.
Yeah, so you have these questions. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do, absolutely. Yeah, that's...
So you can take it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So you have, let's say, there's very, very strong painkillers that you might administer to somebody. But those strong painkillers that you're going to administer to this person, they will not, they may cause issues in other systems.
Yeah.
So they may no longer be in pain, but I'm not doing it to hasten death. I'm doing it to alleviate pain. I think that's also...
Morphine.
Huh?
Morphine.
Exactly. Morphine's a good example. So I'm not doing it to alleviate pain. I'm doing it in order to alleviate pain. I'm not doing it to hasten anything. I'm doing it because I want them to not be in pain. We have another cousin who had a diagnosis. Unfortunately, she was diagnosed with a very, very serious machala, and the treatment for the machala was chemotherapy, which at her age would have been a very, very painful thing to do, and she chose to have painkillers rather than having chemotherapy, knowing that the chemotherapy may help give her more time, but the painkillers would allow her to live in peace, and she chose the painkillers over the chemotherapy. I'm not hastening death. I'm alleviating pain. You follow?
So
I'm not doing it to hasten. I'm doing it in order to alleviate pain, and that would be less of an issue.
Like, let's say I'm young and healthy, and like a good example would be maybe what's the disease called? You get rabies, right? So rabies, it's like 100% fatal unless you get the shot, like in like a 3-4 day time window. Let's say I refuse to get the shot for whatever reason. Am I mechuyav, like, to take the shot? Because
yeah, that's a very good question. That's a separate question.
Oh, like I'm destined to die. Like, oh.
No, I think we have a mitzvah of looking after ourselves. There's a question.
So does that mean I have to extend my life to the maximum amount possible?
That's a very, very good question. Excellent question. There is a concept of v'nishmartem ma'od lenafshotechem, looking after ourselves, of being healthy. There's a very, very interesting discussion in halachic authorities about smoking. Are you allowed to smoke, or are you not allowed to smoke? And part of the debate there is, I enjoy it, but it's not healthy. Those people who argue that it's forbidden to smoke are saying that I have an obligation to take care of my health. And by extension, just like I'm not allowed to smoke, I'll be required to especially a young, healthy person would be required to do everything he can.
So what's the difference? The value of life is the same. I mean, it's both. Like a young, healthy person and an old, sick person, their lives are both infinite.
I know, that's a very good question. Excellent question.
So how can you let an old person not prolong their life with pills or whatever and chemotherapy?
Yeah, excellent question. Excellent. That's an excellent question. Meaning, yeah, that is excellent. Very, very good question.
You would tell him take the chemotherapy.
Yeah, you're quite right. Meaning, there's no like.
Basically, the question is there a halachic difference between an old sick person and a young healthy person?
Excellent question. There shouldn't be. There should not be. But somehow there is, because I suppose there are probably different factors in making the decision. Meaning, if I would like to, I would like to, achieve what I need to achieve. I suppose those factors in a person, there's a lot still to do. And when somebody is coming towards the end of their lives, I suppose they've earned the right to say that my goal now is to be comfortable. You follow? That's meaning that is that could be an ultimate value for me, and therefore I may choose a medical process that may not be the best medically for me, but will provide me with comfort. But I wonder whether a younger person doesn't deserve that level of privilege. You follow what I'm saying? To say that all I want. But your question is excellent. I'm not entirely satisfied with my answer. Your question is excellent. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can answer this. if there was someone in a coma and like they haven't woken up for a few years now, are you allowed to pull the plug? Are you allowed to?
So there was a question about that. People were really against that.
Because at the same time they're in a coma, so they have a chance to wake up. But at the same time, like, and also the other side, you don't know if they're going to wake up. But also, you can't just pull the plug without their permission.
So the truth is, you are a gift, Dor, because your questions, all of your questions, are excellent questions. And I suppose part of what makes this discussion valuable is less the answers, but really like grappling with very good questions and seeing how halachic authorities deal with them. So your question is actually source number 8 over here. It was a question asked to Rav Moshe Feinstein about unplugging an artificial ventilator. At what stage? I mean, unplugging a machine, if somebody is artificially alive, so when I unplug the machine, that's not, when we looked at the remark earlier and we said that something is delaying, that's not like the wood chopper outside. There's a machine pumping air into this person's lungs. When I press the button, there's no air pumping into the lungs. That's not removing a barrier, that is actively, ending their life. So Rav Moshe Feinstein was asked about that, about turning off the machine, and he said it was done in this way. At his time, they had these balloons of oxygen, and the machine was connected to a balloon, a bit like, I don't know how you have gas in Israel. You buy these gas balloons for your cooker, and then every once in a while the gas runs out, and you have to switch from one canister to the next canister. So what Rav Moshe Feinstein is describing is exactly the same situation with a machine. You can't turn off a machine, but what you can do is you keep the machine on until the canister is empty. And once the canister of oxygen is empty, then once somebody's reached the end of their life, and really it's just pumping into somebody who's brain dead. Well, there's part of a bigger discussion of under what circumstances would you not switch the gas canisters, but you would never be allowed to press a button to turn off an artificial ventilator if the situation occurred that this person needs to be taken off the artificial ventilator. So you take them off the artificial ventilator by waiting until the gas canister is empty. You can't actively do something, but you don't need to fill up the canister. You don't need to, move the pipe to another canister with oxygen in it once it's empty.
It's also killing them.
Huh?
It's also killing them.
So I'm not. So passive. So I think that that's what I'm not doing something. I'm allowing something to happen, and in certain situations,
you still decide if they're dying or not.
Yes. So
by deciding to put another canister in.
Yes. So that's a very, very difficult question. I have to say I don't know enough to say when you're allowed to do that. I know that there was a big case in somewhere in America, maybe LA. About 20 years ago, there was a woman, I don't know, maybe she was married, but maybe she wasn't. She had a car accident, like a young woman, and she lived in a vegetative state for 9 years, something like that, with no, according to doctors, at least no possibility of being able to continue her life. And the family wanted to keep the machine on, and the doctors and the, sort of the hospitals were very keen to turn it off, and they turned it off. But there was a huge uproar, and at that time there was a big debate. There are situations in Halacha when you are allowed to turn off machines. I mean, there's a debate in Halacha, Bichlal. I mean, it's a debate that's connected to the topic of organ donation, and that is determining the moment of death according to Halacha. How do you determine the moment of death? There are really two definitions. One is based on a Mishnah, and another one is based on the writings of the Khatam Sofer. The Mishnaic definition of death, and it actually fits in nicely with the Pesukim we were reading about. You know, when man was created, the Torah says that God blew the soul into the nose. Vayipach papach.
Yeah.
And the end of life is also when the soul departs this world, is also through the nose. So when the person is no longer independently breathing, when there's no longer breathing, that is, so if somebody is brain dead, I only mention brain dead because I don't know enough, but there's some point over here where the spine meets the brain, and where
The
there's
brain stem.
the brain stem is no longer connected. So basically, like they happen to be connected, but for all intents and purposes, they're decapitated. So at that stage, for those halachic authorities that consider that moment to be dead, so then you'd be allowed to unplug someone from the machine. But you would not be allowed to unplug them directly from the machine. You would be required to keep them on the machine until the gas canister is empty, and then you'd be allowed
I'm talking
to.
about someone who can't breathe on his own.
Someone who can't breathe anymore. Following the Mishnaic definition of the end of life, once somebody reaches that point where their life has come to an end, brain stem death.
But there's people that are brain dead but can breathe.
Oh, so then that's not. I don't know enough to know the difference between them.
I mean,
but
that's how typically organ donors are. Like, that's like the only possibility to get.
No, but they're not. That's not independently breathing. That's once the brain stem is dead, they're not capable of breathing anymore. So then they're dead.
Yeah.
They just happen to be, artificially something pumping air into the lungs, but the body is no longer alive anymore.
What assisted breathing?
Well, that depends on what the chances are of the person being able to
breathe on their own.
Yeah, eventually, exactly.
No, if you're like you're yourself now, something happened, and either accident or whatever, but what you need assisted breathing to.
No, so that's fine. That you're doing fine. People can have that for many years. Nowadays, sometimes in the park we see these people wheeling canisters with themselves, and it's amazing what they're able to achieve. No, if there is a debate in Halacha about the moment of death, but according to those authorities who say brain stem death is death, and then by extension from that, you'd then be allowed to donate heart, lungs. They are the same people that allow halachic organ donation. If I accept that definition, then I would be allowed to remove somebody from a machine, but I'd only be allowed to remove them from the machine using Rav Moshe Feinstein's requirement here of I don't turn off the machine, but I allow the machine to empty. Sweet, wonderful people. This was a fascinating discussion. I think it opened far more questions than answers, but Ezrat Hashem, we should always have the opportunity to discuss these things purely from the Beit Midrash, purely in the context of a halachic exploration.
Amen.
And it should always be like this. But the point, the important point, the critical point that really comes, I